get up here and say a few things if he'd like, and I think he's going to use the podium here.
Yeah.
So,
I'm old school, I brought those. All right. Have to use the cheaters too. I'm going to try to make this look like I'm not reading it all the way out. I want to make sure I get all these points across to you. I am the publisher and the chief editor of National Communications Magazine, which hopefully I can get as many people to raise their hands in this room as subscribe to Radio Reference. Now this is part of what I do now, and if you don't know what National Communications is, there's magazines over at a table, pick up a copy, and that's really all I want to say about the magazine. So that's part of what I do now. But I would rather share to you, since we got mostly Joes in this room, how I got to where I am at this point and doing what I'm doing today. I've seen scanners evolve from simple receivers to the sophisticated radios of today. And this introduction of this new radio is no different. I've also seen how the data we compile to program these radios evolved from typewriters and 3x5 cards to sophisticated programs as well. Now, my career in the radio hobby has given me the opportunity to meet with many of the innovators in this business, starting way back with Al Lovell. And if you don't know who Al Lovell is, he's the fellow that came up with the Bearcat scanner. I was able to provide input to the manufacturers on the radios and, of course, be able to travel not only across the country but around the world, and all the time with radios and scanners in particular being the basis of the travel. Many times, my experiences over the years in radio have turned up to the pages of National Communications, which, by the way, began publishing in 1991. So as far as radio publications, it's relatively new. I played with radio the bigger part of my life. In fact, the first experience I ever had with radio was when I was about 12 years of age. And my future brother-in-law, who was an electrical engineer, brought home a small AM radio transmitter that he had constructed from one of his projects, one of his labs at the University of Dayton. This little box contained a small microphone and would transmit a few feet away to an AM radio. And of course, it could be turned on by simply clipping the two wires together. And I soon found out that by adding more wire to this little transmitter, it would go further. A couple of years later, I and several of my friends made our own neighborhood radio station. We were using a one-tube, you remember what tubes are? One-tube Philips phono oscillator. Now this transmitter was similar to what my brother-in-law made, except that it ran off the electrical power and we didn't have to change the batteries. And one of my neighbors then was a television repairman, something else that's kind of gone by the wayside. But he had a television repair shop in his house. Also had been a ham radio operator and helped us make a few modifications to our one-tube transmitter so that it would go just a bit further. Okay, then we made our way into high school and we graduated into two-ray radio by using a CB transceivers. I was too young to get a license on my own. At that point, I think you had to be 18 years of age. But I was able to coerce my mother into signing up for a license, and soon I was on the air as KHJ 5611. Soon we had our own network of high school buddies all communicating on CB, and by the time graduation came around, we all became involved with our local fire department. Now, although we were too young to be firefighters, because we had to be 21, we could go on the fire department's auxiliary unit. We were able to attend all the training classes, even were certified, but we couldn't ride or drive the equipment. Instead, we could drive to the fire scene, to operate the fire trucks, pumps, and communicate on the radio. But we couldn't never fight that fire. Now, we can learn about the fire in two ways. We can listen for the siren on top of the firehouse, was a volunteer fire department, or we could come up with a receiver that would get the fire calls directly. Well, of course, at night, they didn't blow the siren. So it was kind of important to come up with a receiver. And I don't know where I came up with it, but I got one. And it would pick up the fire calls on 154.13 megahertz. And of course, the problem with that receiver is it would pick up all sorts of other things as well. Other fire departments, aircraft landing at the airport, and whatnot. I had to train myself to be able to sleep with this radio on with all this other traffic and be able to wake up only when the fire call from my station came in. And it required crystals in order to be able to tune into various agencies. I did not know what frequencies to listen to, however, but able to, talking to other people who had scanners and whatnot, I was able to compile a list of these frequencies for my scanner, and then I had more frequencies than I had crystals, so I wrote down this list and it became a book called Scanner Radio Listings. Now, while I was working at Panacom publishing these frequency booklets, I found my directories covering areas other than Dayton, where I lived. I had one for Columbus and Toledo and Fort Wayne, and somehow or another I managed to put one together for Tampa. Then another local company, I don't know if you guys ever heard of it, called Fox Marketing. They created, okay, one hand went up there. They created a programmable scanner. They had one model, and they had the same problem everybody else did. They didn't know what frequencies were to put in it. So I started creating books for them, what then became the Fox Scanner Radio Listings. All right? And the areas expanded to include Los Angeles, San Diego, the entire state of Arizona, Buffalo, Rochester, Washington, D.C., Orlando, Toronto, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Dallas, Fort Worth, and many more. That was stuck with me ever since. Then I came up with the idea to compress the data and publish the books in more of a regionalized format. This on the Fox Regional Directories, which covered several states. However, before I could complete all these books, Fox themselves, the company had financial problems. The project was canceled, so was my job, and the company was sold. However, fortunately for me, there was another company on the horizon that liked the idea of the regional directories. That company was Uniden. The year was 1987. I began working with Uniden, and that job lasted for 18 years. I was mainly involved with creating the Betty Bearcat frequency directories, which I'm sure some of you have heard of those. They were actually reworks of the Fox regional directories. Then the regional directories evolved into a new product, the Betty Bearcat National Police Directory. But now, though, the books were getting pretty thick. Okay? And eventually came up with the idea of some of my computer buddies, because I am not a computer person, to develop a program where we put all this Betty Bearcat information onto a CD-ROM. And there became the Betty Bearcat frequency directory in a CD format. And that eventually turned into the Mr. Scanner Public Safety and Mr. Scanner SCC. But once again, my career in radio would change. This time, there would be two changes, though. Change number one is that my Uniden stay had ended, and I began a new relationship with Radio Shack. Sorry. and change number two was that somehow or another, I got back into radio broadcasting. I've become involved with a local public service station, which involves me setting up remote broadcasts, recording PSAs, to editing them, any type of spot jobs like that. Of course, I'm still in the publishing business, publishing frequency lists, CDs, and National Communications Magazine. In a way, it feels like my time in radio has run full circle. So here I am back at Uniden once again, with the opportunity to be friends in the business, both old and new. And it's been a great trip, and my ride's not over yet. I'm just waiting for the next chapter. There you go.